Hello friends, we are back for another out of theater review. However, this one is a little bit different because not only did I get to watch the film, I actually had the privilege of doing a Q&A with the director immediately following the film. So I've got a lot of juicy inside knowledge. I've got a lot of background on not only the directorial process, but how we went from a manga to this anime that truly will rival both Transformers 1 and Wild Robot. And what is so incredible is that this film does it in 53 minutes. This is a short film, it is a short anime from a one-off manga, but it is a beautiful depiction of the journey of artistic creation. It is a perfect film. I have cried every single time that I have watched this film. As an artist, as a human being, as a woman who has female friends, it is just a very empowering film. And it's not only a film about the artistic pursuit, but it's also a film that shows us that all of those idiosyncrasies, all of those inferior traits, or those parts of yourself that you may deem less than, could be the guiding force that drives another person's purpose. Look Back is truly one of the greatest films, not only of this year, but of all time. This film was produced by G-Kids, but like I had mentioned earlier, it was directed by Oshiyama, but he didn't just direct it. He also helped write it, produce it. He did the animation for it, and it just goes to explain this creative process and how much we put ourselves into it. He had mentioned during the Q&A that there was a point in time where he had animated over 1,000 panels in maybe a few days, but the pressure of having to complete that weighs on you, and it really shows the journey that they're trying to express in this film. Non-spoiler, but kind of letting you know what the film is about. It's about two girls and their artistic journey. There are two protagonists in the film. The first protagonist is Fujino, and she's been drawing this 4-panel comic for her middle school. They're 13 when it first starts out. She's been drawing this 4-panel comic, and everyone has praised her. They've said that she is the golden goose, she can do no wrong, she's the best artist that they've ever seen. But one of her teachers tells her that a homeschooled girl, they almost think is a delinquent because she never shows up to school, wants to draw as well. And of course, Fujino says, whatever, like she never goes to school, how good could it even be? And when that article comes out and we see the two panels side by side, you can see that the delinquent, or the shut-in Kiyomoto, is far superior than Fujino, which sets her on a path to want to strive harder. So she grabs the books, she's working even harder, she's learning the anatomy of the body to get her drawing up to what she believes is par. And so after months go by, she releases another comic and she sees that Kiyomoto still is better than her. And it's this journey of artistic pursuit that makes you feel defeated and broken. But what does it mean to be an artist? Do you give up? Do you strive to be more? And this journey that these two girls follow, where they learn and grow in not only friendship, but in artistic pursuit, leaves you feeling both open and broken and vulnerable. It is a 53-minute journey that leaves you so much better than when you started. And that's such a hard thing for animation to do, but let alone stories to do in under an hour. And this one far surpasses that expectation. Of course, as artists, we are constantly pursued by challenge and by purpose. That is what this film is all about. It's where we find our purpose and where we find our strength. And one of the big things that I had so many conversations with people about is, what does look back mean to you? And when you watch this film, there are so many different ideas of look back, and I'll get into that in a few seconds when I get to the spoiler part of it. But this film really is about what looking back means to you. Is it that we're constantly looking back at what we haven't done and who's behind us and trying to beat who we were before? Is it a positive? When you look back, do you see positivity or do you see negativity? There are a few Easter eggs in and amongst this film that might lend to that, but another thing that Oshiyama wanted to make very clear, the director of this film, was that he never wanted to put his own interpretation of this film out there. When people ask him, questions like, what do you think look back means to you? The one thing he never wanted to do was to sway or to influence how you saw this movie, because every single person that watches this movie and has an emotional experience, it's because something that they brought into it, just like an artist does. They bring their own interpretations to the medium, and he wanted to make sure that that reigned true for whomever watched this film, and I think that it makes it a much more personal journey. It's also a conversation on friendship and what it means to have a rivalry that is healthy, to have a healthy pursuit of advancement. There are so many depictions of women in media where we're constantly catfighting against each other. And I think for me watching this film, it was so beautiful to see two women that just, of course, when you're children, you don't understand where that tension and where that frustration is coming from, seeing someone better than you, but to see them learning and growing and advancing together and wanting to be better for each other, I think that is such a purity that isn't shown on screen, especially for women. You don't see that, and I cannot stress enough, 53 minutes. They did what other movies couldn't do in 53 minutes, and they did it with subtitles on the screen. I brought a friend to this film because I wanted people to see it so badly, and by the end of this film, they ranked it 5 out of 5 stars because of what it meant to them. And even after a bunch of discord between us about what we thought the movie meant and what we got out of it, they left that conversation in that theater still feeling inspired and moved by what Oshiyama and his team made. This movie can only be described as art. Art makes you feel, art makes you think, art advances you forward, and I truly believe that this film is art. There's also a really interesting credit to the film, and it's gendoga. And essentially what that means is when there's animators, usually there's animators that do the keyframes, and then there's a secondary animator that does the in-between frames that make it a bit smoother of a process. But Oshiyama didn't want to take away from an artist. And so generally what happens is we don't ever see the in-betweens because the fluidity of the movement. So he actually took that process out and kept most of the keyframes. So when you're watching this film, the reason why it's so choppy is because he wanted to, rather than having an in-between editor that takes away from the keyframes, he just had mostly keyframes so that we could keep the integrity of the artist. He didn't want any artist to be lost. He wanted all of the artists to be seen on the screen. He didn't want anything to be taken away because that's the whole idea. This is a movie about artists and artistic creation and the pursuit of art. And so he didn't want any artist to be left behind. And so when you're watching this film, you're going to see that some of the images are almost choppy because he kept the original line work that they did, the sketches. And so some of the fingers, you can see how edgy the lines are, and it's just beautiful. This whole film is a celebration of artists and art. It's the little things that we do that make things so much more developed and detailed. It's beautiful. God, I love this film. I love this film. I love this film. I love this film. And you know what? I'm actually not going to dive into the spoilers of this movie because I really want you guys to experience this movie for yourselves. I think that this is a movie that's going to, if you are an artist, if you are someone who enjoys acting, writing, singing, sketching, making animation panels, this is a movie for you because it's a movie that celebrates all the differences inside of you. And the big thing, I know I mentioned it earlier, but the big thing about this film is that you never know who you are inspiring. It's a celebration of you. It's a reminder to do all of those little things that you think no one's going to care about. Fujino was making these 4-panel comics, and when she saw that this other girl, Kiyomoto, was better than her, her first initial thought after spending all of these months drawing and learning and honing her craft, and still after all of that effort, in her mind, she thought she was less than. She decided to quit. From the end of middle school all the way up to high school, she never drew again. She gave it up. And so when it was time for graduation, one of her teachers or principal asked her to drop the diploma off to Kiyomoto, and she did. And it was then that the two girls met for the first time, and she saw truly how important her artwork was, because this shut-in was drawing and was learning because of her. Because she would every day, as this shut-in, as this delinquent, would get the school newspaper, and her favorite thing to do was to go to these 4-panel comics that Fujino was making. And it inspired her to want to draw. And so the reason that Fujimoto kept growing and becoming a better artist was because of the work of someone who thought that they weren't good enough. It's beautiful. And because of that moment, these two decide to grow and work together and build their crafts. And so again, you never know who you are inspiring. You never know what thing that you may think is unimportant or less than or terrible. It could be the guiding force that drives another individual. This is a great movie. Point blank, period. That's all. That's all I wanted to say. Please make sure you go out and watch it. And honestly, keep doing you. Be the best version of you can be, even if you think it's the worst. Put it out there because you have value, and this is what that movie is trying to express, at least from my point of view. It's that everything you do has value. Make sure you guys like, follow, subscribe, do all the things, hit all the buttons. I will see you guys for the next one. Yeah, just keep creating and go watch Look Back.